The extraction helicopter had already lifted off, carrying 11 SEALs back to safety while leaving 2 souls behind in the Afghan mountains. Commander Marcus Webb was presumed dead, his last known position overrun by enemy fighters, his radio silent for 16 brutal hours. The men who had served under him for 3 years sat in devastated silence, some weeping openly, others staring at nothing as the helicopter cut through the night sky toward base. They had lost their leader, their brother, the man who had pulled each of them from the fire at least once. Back at Forward Operating Base Titan, the chaplain was already preparing words of comfort, and headquarters was drafting the notification letter to Webb's wife and 2 young daughters. But war has a way of defying expectations, of rewriting endings that seem already written. Because at 0347 hours, something impossible happened at the base perimeter. The guards saw 2 figures emerging from the darkness, one supporting the other, both covered in blood and dust, and the unmistakable evidence of combat. When the floodlights illuminated their faces, the guards froze in disbelief. Commander Webb was alive, barely conscious but breathing, draped over the shoulders of a woman most of them knew only by reputation. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, the ghost of the mountain passes, the sniper who had recorded more confirmed kills than any woman in American military history, had walked 17 miles through enemy territory carrying a man twice her weight. She had done what an entire SEAL team could not. She had brought him home. Here is the question that will stay with you long after this story ends. What drives a person to walk into certain death not once, but repeatedly, knowing the odds, knowing the cost, and still choosing to move forward? Elena Vasquez grew up in the sun-scorched flatlands of West Texas, where the horizon stretched endlessly and opportunities were as scarce as rainfall. Her father had served 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine rifleman, returning home with a Purple Heart, a pronounced limp, and nightmares that would wake the household for decades. Her mother worked double shifts at the local hospital, leaving Elena to raise her 2 younger brothers while maintaining her grades and dreaming of something beyond the dusty streets of her small town. The military was not her first choice, but rather the only door that opened when all others remained firmly shut. She enlisted in the Army at 19, carrying with her the lessons her father had taught her about discipline, sacrifice, and the sacred responsibility of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Basic training revealed something in Elena that even she had not known existed. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands and psychological pressure, she found clarity in the chaos. Her drill sergeants noticed her preternatural calm under stress, her ability to regulate her breathing and heart rate when others succumbed to panic. Most remarkably, they noticed her shooting. Elena could place rounds exactly where she intended with a consistency that seemed almost mechanical. The range instructors began gathering to watch her qualify, exchanging glances and quiet words that would eventually reach the ears of those who recruited for special operations support roles. The path from infantry to sniper school was neither straight nor easy. Elena faced resistance at every checkpoint, not always explicit, but always present. She learned to ignore the sideways glances, the whispered comments, the assumptions that she had somehow been given preferential treatment. Her response to doubt was always the same: performance that could not be questioned. She graduated sniper school 3rd in her class, the first woman to complete the program in her training cycle. The 2 men who finished ahead of her would later serve under her command, a fact they would mention with pride rather than resentment. Her first deployment taught her that training could only prepare you for so much. The weight of taking a human life, even an enemy combatant, settled into her bones in ways she had not anticipated. She learned to compartmentalize, to separate the woman who called her mother every Sunday from the soldier who squeezed the trigger when the crosshairs aligned. This was not coldness, but survival, a necessary adaptation that allowed her to continue functioning in an environment designed to break the human spirit. By her 3rd deployment, Elena had developed a reputation that spread through military channels like wildfire through dry brush. They called her La Sombra, the shadow, for her ability to disappear into terrain that seemed to offer no concealment whatsoever. The mission that would define Elena's legacy began with intelligence reports suggesting that a high-value target was moving through the Karengal Valley, using a network of caves and mountain passes that had frustrated American forces for years. Commander Marcus Webb's SEAL team was tasked with interdiction, supported by Elena's small sniper element operating from an elevated position 3 kilometers from the primary objective. The plan was sound, the intelligence appeared reliable, and the team had executed similar operations dozens of times before. But war rarely respects careful planning, and this operation would prove how quickly circumstances could spiral beyond anyone's control. Elena established her position before dawn, her spotter Corporal Davis settling in beside her as they began the patient work of observation and preparation. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team move into position, their movements precise and professional even in the challenging terrain. Commander Webb's leadership was evident in every aspect of the operation, from the spacing of his men to the way they communicated through hand signals that conveyed complex information in moments. Elena had worked with Webb 3 times before, and she respected him as one of the few officers who truly understood the value of integrated sniper support rather than treating her element as an afterthought. The ambush was devastating in its coordination. Enemy fighters emerged from positions that intelligence had missed entirely, catching the SEAL team in a crossfire that immediately produced casualties. Elena began engaging targets at extreme range, her rifle speaking in measured intervals as she worked to relieve pressure on the PIN team below. Davis called adjustments while simultaneously coordinating with the Tactical Operations Center, requesting the air support that would take far too long to arrive. Within the first 5 minutes, Elena had eliminated 7 enemy fighters, but the numbers were overwhelming, and the SEALs were being pushed toward a ravine that offered no escape. When Webb's voice came over the radio calling for emergency extraction, Elena heard something she had never detected in his transmissions before: desperation. 3 of his men were down, ammunition was running low, and enemy reinforcements were visible moving along the ridgeline. The extraction helicopter was 40 minutes out, an eternity in the compressed timeline of combat. Elena made a decision in that moment that violated every protocol governing her mission. She told Davis to maintain position and continue providing supporting fire. Then she began moving down the mountain toward the firefight. Her spotter's protests followed her for the first 100 meters before fading into the sounds of battle. She was going to reach that team or die trying. The descent was a nightmare of loose rock and enemy fire. Elena moved with a combination of speed and caution that seemed contradictory, but was essential for survival in this environment. She used every fold in the terrain, every shadow, every moment of enemy distraction to advance toward the SEAL team's position. Her rifle was now more liability than asset at these ranges, so she transitioned to her sidearm and the combat skills she had honed through years of training. Twice she encountered enemy fighters moving to reinforce the ambush, and twice she eliminated them with clinical efficiency that left no time for hesitation or remorse. When she reached the ravine where the surviving SEALs had established a defensive perimeter, she found a scene of controlled chaos. Corpsmen were working on wounded men while shooters maintained fire on multiple enemy positions. Commander Webb was everywhere at once, directing fire, repositioning men, calling in coordinates for the air support that was still 15 minutes away. He saw Elena arrive, and for a moment his expression showed pure confusion, as if her presence defied the laws of physics. She simply nodded and took up a position on the perimeter, her accuracy immediately shifting the balance of the engagement. The next 12 minutes were the longest of Elena's life. She lost count of her engagements, operating on instinct and training while the enemy continued pressing their attack. When the A-10 Warthogs finally arrived, their cannon runs breaking the enemy assault with devastating effectiveness, Elena allowed herself a single breath of relief. But that relief evaporated when she saw Commander Webb collapse. A round had found a gap in his body armor, and blood was spreading across his abdomen with terrifying speed. The extraction helicopter was landing, but Webb was unconscious and the corpsman was already shaking his head with the expression that Elena had learned to recognize as professional surrender. She refused to accept that judgment. As the other SEALs loaded their wounded and dead onto the helicopter, Elena made another decision that defied logic and protocol. The helicopter was at capacity with casualties, and Webb's wound required immediate stabilization that the aircraft could not provide during flight. The nearest forward surgical team was at FOB Titan, 17 miles through territory that was now fully alerted to American presence. Elena told the helicopter to go, that she would bring the commander out on foot. The pilot thought she was insane. The SEAL team leader thought she was insane. But they were out of time and out of options, and Elena was already applying pressure to Webb's wound while calculating the route that offered the best chance of survival. The first 3 miles were the most dangerous, as enemy fighters were still searching for survivors from the ambush. Elena moved through the darkness carrying Webb in a fireman's carry, his weight threatening to drive her into the rocky ground with every step. She had trained for this, had carried weighted packs through brutal terrain during selection and qualification. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of moving a wounded man through hostile territory while maintaining tactical awareness. Her muscles screamed for rest that she could not provide, her lungs burned with effort at altitude, and her mind constantly calculated threats and routes and the declining condition of the man she carried. Webb regained consciousness around mile 5, his first words a demand that she leave him and save herself. Elena ignored him, adjusting her grip and continuing forward through a narrow pass that enemy fighters had not yet reached. He tried to argue, invoking rank and reason and the mathematics of survival that clearly favored one living soldier over 2 dead ones. Elena's response was simple. She told him to shut up and conserve his energy, because she was going to carry him to safety whether he approved or not. It was perhaps the only time in his career that Commander Webb was rendered speechless by a subordinate. The hours that followed tested every reserve that Elena possessed. She stopped periodically to check Webb's wound, redressing the bandage and administering the limited medical supplies she carried. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to provide tactical advice, sometimes murmuring to his daughters as if they were present in the darkness. During one rest stop, he told Elena about his oldest daughter's upcoming piano recital, how she had been practicing for months, and how he had promised to be there. The vulnerability in his voice was something Elena had never associated with the legendary commander, and it reminded her why they were struggling through this impossible journey. Dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon as Elena crossed into territory that was nominally friendly, though no territory in this region was truly safe. She had covered 14 miles in 8 hours, an achievement that would later be studied in training courses as an example of human performance under extreme conditions. But she had 3 miles remaining, and her body was beginning to fail. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled with increasing frequency, and she had begun talking to herself to maintain focus. Webb, semi-conscious, could offer no assistance. Everything now depended on Elena's refusal to quit, her absolute rejection of the surrender that her body was demanding. The final approach to FOB Titan became legendary in its own right, passed down through military channels and eventually reaching the public through carefully worded commendations and award citations. The guards who first spotted Elena thought they were seeing ghosts, so unlikely was the sight of a woman carrying a SEAL commander out of territory that should have been impenetrable. Medical teams rushed to receive Webb, whisking him to surgery while Elena collapsed against a barrier wall and refused to move until someone confirmed that he would survive. The surgeon would later report that Webb had perhaps 2 hours of life remaining when Elena delivered him, that her decision to walk rather than wait for another extraction had been the only choice that could have saved him. The aftermath brought attention that Elena neither sought nor welcomed. Military leadership wanted to understand how a single sniper had accomplished what conventional planning had deemed impossible. Her after-action report ran to 47 pages, detailing every decision and engagement with the precision that characterized all her work. But the report could not capture the intangibles, the willpower and determination and love for a fellow warrior that had driven her through those 17 miles. Some things existed beyond documentation, beyond analysis, beyond the military's endless appetite for lessons learned. Webb's recovery took 6 months, during which he communicated regularly with Elena despite her attempts to deflect recognition. He told her that she had given him time he should not have had, that his daughters would have their father because of her refusal to abandon hope. The weight of that statement settled onto Elena alongside all the other weights she carried, the accumulated burden of lives saved and lives taken that defined her service. She did not view herself as a hero, a term she found uncomfortable and reductive. She was simply a soldier who had done her job when the circumstances demanded everything she had to give. The military awarded Elena the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest valor award available, with recommendations for the Medal of Honor still working through the lengthy approval process. More importantly to Elena, the SEAL community embraced her as one of their own, an honorary member of a brotherhood that rarely opened its doors to outsiders. Webb's team made her an informal mascot, sending her unit patches and challenge coins and invitations to events that she usually declined but always appreciated. She had proven something that transcended gender or branch, or any of the divisions that sometimes fragmented the military community. She had proven that courage recognizes no boundaries. Elena served 3 more years after the mission that made her famous, continuing to operate in the shadows while her reputation grew in the light. She mentored young snipers, both men and women, sharing the technical skills and psychological resilience that had defined her career. Her teaching emphasized the aspects of military service that training manuals often overlooked: the importance of relationships, the necessity of maintaining humanity in dehumanizing circumstances, and the understanding that true strength included the capacity for compassion. Her students would go on to serve with distinction across multiple theaters, carrying forward the lessons she had imparted. The decision to retire came gradually, prompted by accumulating injuries and the growing recognition that she had given the military everything she had to give. Her final deployment ended without fanfare. A quiet extraction from a position she had occupied for 72 hours while providing overwatch for an operation that succeeded precisely because of her contribution. She cleaned her rifle for the last time in a military capacity, performing the ritual with the same care she had brought to her first day of sniper training years before. The weapon had become an extension of herself, and putting it down felt like releasing a part of her identity. Commander Webb attended her retirement ceremony, walking without assistance for the first time since his injury. His presence said everything that words could not adequately express, a living testament to what Elena had accomplished during the darkest hours of that Afghanistan night. In his remarks, he spoke about leadership and sacrifice and the meaning of service. But his voice broke when he described the moment he regained consciousness and realized that Elena was still carrying him forward. That image, he said, would stay with him until his final breath, a reminder of what human beings could achieve when they refused to accept impossible odds. Elena's transition to civilian life brought challenges that she had not anticipated: the difficulty of translating military experience into contexts that civilians could understand, the strange emptiness of days without mission and purpose. She eventually found her footing as a consultant and advocate, working with veterans organizations and speaking at events where her story could inspire others facing their own impossible circumstances. She never forgot the lessons of her service, carrying them forward into a new chapter that was still being written. Elena Vasquez's story represents something larger than individual heroism, though her actions certainly qualified as heroic by any standard. Her journey illuminates the possibilities that emerge when artificial limitations are set aside and human potential is allowed to flourish without arbitrary constraints. She did not become legendary because she was a woman in a male-dominated field, though that context added complexity to her path. She became legendary because she consistently performed at levels that demanded recognition, because she refused to accept boundaries that others considered fixed, and because when the moment of ultimate testing arrived, she responded with everything she had. The lessons embedded in her experience extend far beyond military applications. Her story teaches that preparation matters, that the countless hours of training and discipline she invested created the foundation for performance under pressure. It teaches that relationships matter, that her willingness to risk everything for Commander Webb grew from genuine human connection rather than abstract duty. It teaches that perseverance matters, that the 17-mile journey succeeded because she refused to stop even when stopping seemed like the only rational choice. For those who hear Elena's story and wonder whether they could do the same, she offers this wisdom: courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. That something might be duty or love, or simply the refusal to abandon someone who depends on you. Whatever form it takes, courage is available to anyone willing to reach for it. Elena Vasquez reached for it in the mountains of Afghanistan, and found that it was there, waiting to be claimed. Her story stands as proof that ordinary people, through extraordinary commitment, can accomplish what seems impossible. And in that proof lies hope for all of us facing our own mountains, our own burdens, our own long walks through the darkness toward distant lights that seem impossibly far away.